Broadway transfer of your production. What do you get when you do that? More revenue, bigger audience, national validation. Incredibly seductive. And when you're planning your season, and Michael David and I were just talking about this at lunch, and we made the point that do not believe for a minute, for a second, that when you look at the directors plan their season, they're not mindful of the potential of a commercial transfer or the filter into Broadway or extended flight in some way. And they want more chances to get more improvement chances for this to happen. Because of the fact the star of being the show so much better, maybe be a show by a well-known playwright. And in any case, there's a mitigation of what the original impulse, what the original idea of the resident theaters were, which is to create a place where you could be bolder, more experimental, to do work that is, that is protected from the exigencies of the box office and these other expressions. Now, if you're looking at this, if you have a Broadway transfer and it's better report, it's delighted. So what's the best way to increase your odds, to greater ensure your chance of success and doing all these things and getting all these methods? Well, the best way would be to start a Broadway show at your own theater. In order to make a partnership with commercial producers so that the show is almost guaranteed to go to Broadway from the time it starts in your theater. Then you're almost sure to get a great deal of national attention and enhanced revenues and so forth. I don't think it's exactly what Herman Guthrie or Bill Packer, Bob Disney had in mind. And it's legitimate to ask, I think, at this point, what does that do to the company? Go back to the first one. The great white folks moving from here to Broadway, the whole company being disrupted, having to move there. What happens to what was originally the repertory idea, which has to do with essentially a company of athletes coming together to do a season of plays. It often is either in repertory or at a minimum the plays will relate to one another in terms of a certain theme or something that the actors and the company wants to explore. And the season will have a theme that the shows relate to each other. The actors take roles according to what might enhance their own growth in their work. And secondly, these actors, these artists work in a protected environment and they can do more challenging and I think more interesting work. And if you think about it, a Broadway-bound show is a direct abnegation of both of these impulses and ideas. The company itself is uprooted, it's taken away from the theater and planted somewhere else. The company is suddenly not in residence at the theater. And secondly, the marketplace becomes the sole determinant of the success of the endeavor. And the singular method for evaluation of that show. How long does it run? How does it do? What kind of money does it make? And if you look at the whole universe of not-for-profit theater, the world of PCG and Ward and Bill and all, you can say about them. But all those theaters function because they have subsidies. I was saying earlier today, the theater is the only one of the performing arts that has this dualism, has this dichotomy. You don't have it in the ballet or opera or symphony orchestras or whatever. The theater is the only one of the performing arts that has a very important commercial marketplace aspect. But these theaters are subsidized by local patrons, corporations, individual local foundations, national foundations, and in a critically small way, even the NEA. But they're really under-supported. It's a very difficult question. I'm just learning to get my mind around it.
Well, just to follow on to that, I mean, could you imagine in individual communities as sort of an assessment of supply and demand? I mean, to the point of the gentleman that spoke prior, what do we have too much much of? What do we have, maybe if it is a mismatch between supply and demand, you have too many of these kinds of theaters, not enough of these kinds of theaters, or we have them all located spatially, there's a lot of spatial competition because they're all within 8 miles of each other, but if you go 50 miles out of town, there's nothing. I mean, would that be helpful? Somebody looking, somebody should look at that.
That'll be up to the cities.
Yeah.
As they map their cultural assets and try to determine maybe which are worth their support. There tends to be a big political aspect to this process as that rolls out.
Hi, Michael Robertson from the Lark Play Development Center in New York. I think it's interesting. I feel like I'm having a lot of conversations about the disconnect between mainstream audiences and theater, and sort of are we relevant, all of those things. I think we've been battling that at different stages, and I think the audience statistics are kind of alarming. And I find it ironic because I think kids are doing theater when they're born, right? We're born making up plays and singing songs, and sort of there is something very primal about theater, and sort of getting back to that is something I'm really interested in. Given that we all have that sort of childish, we all want to be an actor, we all want to be a producer, we all want to build a set, we all want to do that. I think we're born with that, right? We want to story tell. I'm curious what either of you would say about the proliferation of training programs in the United States. I feel like master's degree and bachelor's degrees in every aspect of theater are popping up left and right. I'm concerned that they're money-making opportunities for universities and not necessarily opportunities to really certify that people are trained and gifted to go out into the field. I don't know that that's true yet, but I feel like there's an endless supply of people who want to participate as an actor, director, designer, writer, all of those things. I'm curious, in terms of all of these programs that are sprouting up left and right at universities, what do you think about that? How does that play into the supply and demand?
That's a question for you. You were trained in one of these conservatories, and this is your subject now.
I was, and I'm not acting. I think that no doubt, I mean, it's startling the number of graduates, I think, from the programs, given the perhaps difficulty getting work. I know that some researchers have been looking at, have been trying to track what happens to people when they graduate from these conservatory programs, in part to try to put some honest figures to it, because it is not clear that people have good data on what happens when you get out of one of these programs. And in my research, which I'm doing on the economic forces impacting the American theater since the 80s, one of the things I'm interested to look at is the degree to which the growing number of programs and graduates sort of actually help to fuel a sort of what you call a pro-am theater movement, right? Where you see these incredibly talented people who graduate, can't get jobs in theater, so start their own companies. And they're getting paid, $4,000 a year or something, running very good small companies. But this is also what I think perpetuates the growth and supply, right? Is that you have people coming out with, now they're talented, they want to do something with that. So I don't know what the answer is, but it's certainly different.
Hey, howdy, I'm Kirk from the Remax in Austin, Texas.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Kirk, I'm from the Remax in Austin, Texas. I just want to, I'm in just to be about to get hired by you, because I want to critique some of the weird things that I'm hearing. Yeah. Out of one side of your mouth, I'm hearing this idea that there needs to be more idealism in the theaters, and then on the other side, I'm hearing this critique that theaters are too much, the market can't sustain them. And it seems to me, to a certain extent, that the very fact that there are all these nonprofits starting, they're sort of rejecting whether the market can sustain them or not, maybe the very idealism that you're looking for. But then to hear you say that maybe we need to cut out the $10,000, $20,000 grants and give more money to the bigger theaters, which you say are more like commercial theater as a solution,
Not necessarily.
seems confounding. It just seems like a thought that you floated, which as a person who gets little $10,000, $5,000, $20,000 grants, to hear you sort of float the idea that maybe we just need to give more money to bigger institutions, which you yourself critique as not being idealistic, seems totally confusing and baffling.
To me, there's I think you're making a fundamental error. You're equating idealism with small size or new or startup. I don't make that equation. I think there are many big theaters that are terribly idealistic and committed. Many of them have had long-standing and sustained visions and points of view. and are worthy of support. So I don't accept the premise.
What's the theater you're saying is too much like a Broadway house?
I'm just saying there are too many. There are too many theaters to be able to support the artists that work in them, and I think that is a shame. It's a shame when you hire actors and designers and directors, and you cannot pay them a living wage. I think that's disgraceful. And I think we have to look at all kinds of ways to try to address that problem. I better not sit here. I'm under strict instructions. I better not sit here as chairman of the NEA and say this theater is worthy and this theater isn't. There's a panel process that assesses our grant making, but I have some very strong feelings about it.
Hi, Jenny Mahoney from It Theater and Seven Devils Playwrights Conference in Idaho. And addressing somewhat the last question, but also the question of rural theaters, I wonder, looking at rural theaters, one of the reasons that we do so much of our work in Idaho is because financially it is a lot easier to get work done someplace where things just aren't as expensive as they are in the more urban areas. But I've noticed, and it seems to me like that is one way to be able to pay and support artists, is to not all center them in these places where the economies are just impossible. But then when I look at the funding for theaters outside of those urban areas, I look at my list here is North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, Nevada, Idaho. There are 0 theaters that got funded by the NEA in those states, and that's a huge block of the Pacific Northwest.
Don't we fund the Shakespeare Theater in Idaho?
No.
Oh, we do. We do.
It's not on the site.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. This is not. Oh, it's only, yes, this past round of deadlines. So this is, the most recent round of deadlines. The one where I got rejected, come on. Why else do I go and look at these things? But I was shocked, actually, to look at the large area in which there were very few theaters that were funded, and that even in some of those states like Oregon and Washington State, where there was more funding, that it was really pushed towards the coasts. And so I just sort of, and I don't even know what my question is, except for maybe looking for some comment about what connection then might be able to be made between those places where financially you could support artists, and yet the funding doesn't seem to go in that direction. Not just the NEA, but I would say a lot of places have that problem.
This is a two-way street. What we have to do it, you have to do it. We're trying, when I went to Chelsea, Michigan, which I was referred to earlier, 5,000 population, Purple Rose Theater, Jeff Daniels Theater. They're doing amazing work in the community. It's really giving that kind of identity. And I said to them, well, do you have an NEA grant? And they said, no. Hopefully, we will now, or we're going to apply for one. We have to get out and find the theaters and ask them that question, and then give them, and we have grant seminars to give them the coaching, because they're unfamiliar with our grant process, and we have to help them to apply. And we have to do that in rural communities and places all across America. That's our job. It's also your job to bring yourself to our attention, and not, to pound the table, knock on our door and say, what about us, and submit the applications. And we both have to do that, but we need to do it. We need to get out, get out and around. Yes. Okay.
One thing I would say, Rocco, is I think that I do think Kurt's point that those $5,000 and $10,000 grants mean an awful lot to those smaller theaters. And in some ways, it's the $25,000 grant to the big theater, but I think makes no sense to a lot of people.
Exactly. And I'm referring more to that because there are many theaters with $2 million budgets or $5 million budgets. Right. That get $25,000 grants. Maybe we can get fewer grants.
Right.